welcome back to yet another episode of Perf Podcast. Today we have Coaches Chat, and joining me today is Danny. How are you doing today?
I'm good, man. It's been a while since I've been on a podcast, but let's get to it. Keen to
Yeah,
talk to everybody on the pod.
can't wait too. So, what do we want to talk about today?
So I messaged you the other day. I think I'm really keen to talk about longevity in the sport. I think in the past couple months, these thoughts have kind of like simmered up. Thinking, I've been through quite a while now, and gone through some ups and downs, and realized like there could have been a lot of moments where I could have just quit, and there might have been a lot of factors that have kept me in the sport. But I also recognize like longevity in this sport is also a big reason why people don't tend to fully maximize their potential, especially juniors that, you see a quick rise and then they fall off. So keen to talk about that today with you, Bobby.
Yeah, likewise, man. I feel like this is something that we both, or if not like majority of the listeners, they can empathize with. Because if you stay in the game long enough, you're bound to have some ups and downs. It's not just gonna be like a smooth sailing journey. Because if it's easy, then like I think everyone would get to where we want to be.
Yeah, exactly. I guess we could show a post that inspired this talk as well. If you're listening to this and you've been in the powerlifting space long enough, you might have seen a post recently put up by Anna, Instagram at the Human Crane. I could share it for our viewers on YouTube, but basically, he's showed like the potential gains you make and the average dots of everyone in their years of powerlifting. And it seems to be like people see this massive rise in average dots from the first, second to third year. And things start to really slow down. And people will tend to see that first peak in their career in the 8th year of powerlifting. So it's a really long-term sport, but he's also added the fact that yes, you might see your possible peak potential for the first time in your 8th year, but the drop off in the number of lifters is almost equally exponential going from the first to the 8th year, right? So I guess we could talk about like the factors that allow powerlifting to have become so popular, that allow for like people to give it a try. Did you want to talk about that, Bobby?
Yeah, sure. So I guess with the rising popularity from powerlifting, majority of it goes to social media, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. It's just combined the fact that it has such a low uh, barrier of entry. Like you can literally just buy a singlet and pay your federation and just compete on meet. You don't need to necessarily train for one either. You can just sign up for one just for fun. That's how easy the barrier to powerlifting is. And I think a lot of people can get really attracted to the huge boost in progress, like you mentioned in the first to third year. And when it just doesn't seem to, after the third year, when the progress just doesn't seem to match the first 3 years, then like people are like just maybe I don't I don't see what um they just don't see the need to continue the sport just because they don't progress as much when like it's physiologically pretty impossible to, just because it's just harder to keep those it's just harder to drive those stimulate those adaptations like over and over. It's just going to be uh I guess diminishing returns over time.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
exactly.
that's my take on it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that will apply to pretty much anything as well, right? Like whether you're doing another sport, whether you're doing another craft, there's always going to be diminishing returns. And like if you put a lot of effort into something, I guess the reward you get from that becomes less and less, or subtler and subtler, I would say. Like, when you're first starting off, you're learning a lot of things at once. Everything's very novel, right?
Yeah.
You're learning the technical things, and you're constantly, or myself personally, I felt like when I first started, I would obsess over powerlifting because everything was so new to me, right? So being able to take in a lot is really exciting. hence why I think people see those massive improvements in their first and second and third year of powerlifting. They're still learning something new, right? But as you start doing it more and more often, you realize what works, and it more becomes just ingraining technique, and being really consistent with things as well, right? Like once it all boils down to it, you've got good technique, you've got recovery, and that's basically it, right?
Yeah.
And I think it becomes the ones who get really strong make it a part of their lifestyle, and it's not so much like I guess something fresh and new that's a hobby, right?
Yeah. I don't
And
think
like you
any
said,
of like the world champions, they consider powerlifting as a hobby.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And mind you, they're doing the exact same thing for a prolonged period of time because of those diminishing gains, right? Like I could imagine, you know, they have an idea of what works for them and they're just running the same thing. So it becomes less, I guess, novel, more mundane, and they're okay with that, right? Whereas people that are first starting in, once that initial like novelty starts to wear off, things can get quite difficult, I imagine. And having things like setting goals or having a deeper reason as to why you choose to pursue it, past the novelty, I think is something that we could cover, as to why I think that could be a factor into improving longevity in the sport. Are we good?
Yeah. So do you want to start us off? Just
Yeah, for
maybe
sure.
since how long have you been training, Danny?
So I started powerlifting in 2018. I started training back up when I was in high school, so like 2014. So I'm reaching that 10-year, like I guess, gym mark. But in terms of powerlifting, it's been about, quick maths, 6 years.
6. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm about to reach that elusive 8-year peak mark.
Yeah.
I guess we could talk. I think the places where potential pitfalls lie in my career, I think we could talk about like this idea of like a gifted junior syndrome. I definitely felt like I had that. I don't know about you, Bobby, with your massive bench press, but like when I first started in the sport and like I didn't know what powerlifting was. My first coach, James Frecklington, he gave me the hope, and I'm very grateful for it. He was like, "Oh, you have potential." When I first gave him like what I could possibly 1RM without any sort of like training experience in terms of powerlifting. And from the first moment, I was like, okay, like I just want to realize my potential no matter what, right? So we fast forward, go through that process. And I remember like the first time I got injured, I think it was just something minor with like my rotator cuff. It was like I felt it just pop when I was deadlifting one time, and I thought it was like catastrophic, right? I thought it was over and my whole career is over, not knowing like people who are in powerlifting will go through something like this. And that doesn't mean it's the end of it. People have gone through things that are way more catastrophic, such as like Steve, torn bicep, broken arms,
Broke his
and they
arm.
still managed to come back, right? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, something like that where, I've faced an injury, and I think that was the first reality check of like, it's not going to be linear progress, and I'm going to have to claw my way to get back to, I guess, baseline at first, and then I get to continue to pursue. So I guess that was the first instance where it felt like the timeline that I'd set for myself had become expanded, or I wasn't making progress, right? I guess we could fast forward to, I guess, having to be in a challenging weight class where, competition is very high. And I had those aspirations to continue to progress to an international level and just not making it. That could also be another, I guess, reason why people could have fallen off if they were in the position I was. And I guess having to accept, like, with the accumulation of injuries and all that, having to consider a weight class and reconsider your identity and goals. So a couple of things to unpack there, right? We got injuries, we got competitiveness, and we got like an identity shift and having to move up a weight class to improve longevity.
Yeah. So here's my take on competitiveness. I feel like no matter what weight class you'll be in, it'll always be competitive. You just gotta look in the right places. Yeah, like
I agree.
yeah, the world's a big place, man, and there are a lot of strong people. And going up a weight class, going down a weight class, at the end of the day, it shouldn't be driven by competition. It should be driven by what you want to achieve. So in this case, it was you trying to maximize your potential, which I completely agree there. Because just going up or down a weight class, it can just you just explore more of yourself and you find out whether it works or not.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Yeah,
to put it simply, you got to fuck around to find out, right? Like, if
yeah,
there's some people who can manage to become more competitive when they cut, like Evie Corrigan, you've got your Tim Monagati.
yeah,
They do that, and the reward is priceless, right? World champion, Sheffield, it's crazy.
yeah,
But on the flip side, like if you feel like you've plateaued and you're on the verge of almost wanting to quit the sport because you're not seeing progress, why not consider going up a weight class and I guess reintroduce some extra recoverability into your life?
yeah. So Danny, you were previously 66ers and
Mm-hmm.
you moved up. And how did you find your recovery since moving up?
So that was almost instantaneously. So for I guess context, the decision was based around the fact that like after nationals, I'd be training and I could not get past 3 weeks without something flaring up, right? And even to Steve's best ability to try and navigate it, like he would reduce volume, we would have to load manage, and I was doing considerably less than what I was on a regular basis. That still wasn't enough for the flare-ups to, I guess, subside, right? So basically, we're just running ourselves into a wall at even lower RPEs than what I'd usually train at. So like I was barely recovering, right? Barely able to stay in the weight class to even get the chance to push. And that's what we all want to do when we first start, right? We're like I said, we want to push our limits, me personally, and like hit these big numbers. But if you can't even get through a set or get through a week that's meant to be like super easy, that's hugely demotivating, right? So we
Yeah,
made the decision, go up, and within that week, I felt great. Like I was like still apprehensive, obviously, about like, am I going to get injured? But like I got to that 3 week, 4 week mark and nothing, almost instantaneously, right? So I think I'm a good case of how going up a weight class can help improve longevity. And there was also, sorry, camera's dead, but it'll come back. There was a huge spike in motivation again once I decided to move up a weight class. I was hitting bigger numbers. I could set bigger goals. And that, I guess, like renewed my enjoyment for powerlifting again.
yeah. So I feel like in my case, I was just doing powerlifting to be competitive. I um, I started getting introduced to powerlifting around the same time as you. So it was around
Yeah.
2018. So coming into this 6 year mark,
Yeah.
I just left a place where I was competitive before, and I just wanted to find something to be competitive in, and I found powerlifting. And
Nice. I'm
it
just
was
curious, what were
just
you doing before?
I was just playing games. I was playing esports.
But competitively, yeah. So that
Yeah,
competitive itch. Yeah.
yeah. So I think to me, just being able to compete at like against the best in the world, it was just a huge. It was something I took pride in, and I think since I started powerlifting, I told myself I wanted to go to worlds.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know like I believe back then like junior worlds wasn't even a thing. It was just worlds and like every age class was in it, and I told
Yep.
myself I wanted to end up being there. So I think I just trained really hard, and things were starting to look good until around 2022 when I injured my knee. So I think it was tendinopathy as well. And
Mm-hmm.
I believe I wanted to compete that year. And I think because of that, I just didn't get the chance to compete at nationals. I was just focusing on like recovering because my
Yeah,
first meet it was in 2021. I wanted to compete again in nationals in 2022 to
yeah,
secure like I guess like a regional spot or just yeah just get my just I guess because powerlifting is a sport that we don't really compete often. I just wanted to sharpen my competitive edge.
yeah,
So
for sure.
I felt like with that injury, I felt setback. I think it took me about half a year. Um, it was around that. Um, I believe it was around from April to about September, October, till I was fine. Then that's when I really start picking things up again. So that was my first injury. It felt like I could never see the end of the tunnel,
Yeah,
and
that first time sucks.
yeah, like it's so scary. Like when you don't know what's gonna happen, when you're gonna feel okay. I think it's very mentally taxing. It kind of eats you out um if it's someone as competitive as me, like big goals, wanting to do a
Hmm.
lot, like
Hmm.
just wanting to be the best version of myself, and I get held back because of injuries like this. I'm sure I'm not the only one who does it. Like I'm sure like people listening into this, like they've gone through some things as well, and the first time it probably hits the hardest.
Yeah.
And I think this first experience just made me more receptive to, I guess, whenever small flare ups happen. So back then it was your rotator cuff injury, right? And
Hmm.
you felt like it was the end of the world. And how did you feel now if like something just flares up compared to last time?
I would know that it's temporary. I'll just load manage. So like immediately, I've gone through a couple changes. I used to like be really scared of injury. Then I would push past injury and like just push it no matter what. And then now I'm learning like, okay, there's a limit to that as well. And I've kind of gone back to load managing, but without the catastrophizing part. So it's
Yeah,
definitely less mentally taxing, but like it's still going to reduce your performance for a bit. But as long as you're not making things worse and you're doing enough things to re strengthen what initially, I guess, has gotten into pain or been injured, eventually it's going to come back up. Even though it might be a slow burn, it might take months, it might take a couple of weeks, but there's something you could always do that'll get you back to baseline and stronger.
yeah. And I think for me, it was that there was that one specific day where I realized I was 100% fine. I was progressing my leg extensions due to my knee tendinopathy. And usually it would just hurt at the end range when my knee is
Yep.
like flexed at the most. So one time, like the weight just hit the leg extension, like the weight
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just
That hits
hit
the
the
plate.
thing, and like yeah, it didn't hurt at all. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm okay again. So I think I
I'm
went
back.
on to
I'm
squat like,
back.
huh?
I'm
Yeah, it
back.
was so bad. Yeah, it was so bad. Then I think that day, I think the next session, I just brought in like my training gear because back when I was injured, I just didn't use my knee sleeves on my belt because I didn't really need to. So I brought in my knee
Hmm.
sleeves, brought in my belt. I think the first day I just squatted 200, like after like months of squatting.
Wow.
And to me, it felt like, yeah, I didn't really regret that much at all. It was
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
the pain inhibiting me to lift. It wasn't that I was getting weaker. Like
Yeah.
I felt like I thought I was like so far behind, I wouldn't be able to like progress, go to worlds, stuff like that. But I
Hmm.
wasn't actually that far off than I thought.
Hmm.
Yeah. So when you had like a major injury and you recovered from it, how far were you from when you first before you got that injury? And like was it as mentally taxing as to get back to where you were?
Um, I mean, we could use a current example. So I've been nursing a shoulder injury for almost like 8 months, and
Yeah.
I'm finally back, right?
Yeah.
And I'm basically hitting close to what I used to hit as well, right? So even though it's taken a long time, I felt like getting back to baseline happened fairly quickly once the pain subsided. It did take a while for the pain to subside, but it's not like I had to work my way up to, for example, like 170 bench again. First time I hit 170 bench, you could argue it almost took like 6 years, right? But now I'm
Yeah,
doing it in the span of 8 months, right? And
yeah,
it doesn't feel like I need to force it. It's just coming back. Like you said, just because the pain's not inhibiting, right?
yeah.
Um, I think you're also going through something as well with your hamstring, right? Do you feel comfortable to share how that process has been going?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, like we're all here. It's a safe space. Everyone's been injured. I think it's fine. So, um, do you remember how you said just I think a few minutes ago, like you said that you were first afraid of injuries and then you pushed through an injury? So for
Hmm.
me, that hamstring injury was due to me pushing it. So
Yeah,
I think I was about 2 months out from Asians, and I had a lot of goals. So I think I wanted to be Asia's best junior. I think I
yeah,
wanted like the world record. I didn't get at Worlds. Yeah, I think it was just those two. And
yeah,
I think 2 months out, I was just getting this really niggly sensation from my hamstring, and I just couldn't pull anything off the floor. I think above 200, it would just be excruciating.
yeah.
Then I think it challenged me in a good way compared to Worlds. Worlds was just training hard and like it felt good. It felt rewarding because it felt fulfilling because I was able to train hard for something I wanted to work hard for.
Yeah,
And
it's a different kind of hard, right? Or
yeah, it's a
like
different
different
kind of
kind of
hard.
challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, I at the time, because I was still competing, it was it was very mentally challenging. And it was also something I welcomed because at the time it was just really hard to take in. But at the same time, now looking in hindsight, I'm glad I managed to sort of go through it because I did learn a lot from that experience. I remember I wasn't able to pull two reds at all,
Hmm.
and I think it was 2 weeks out. I called Tom. Then um, we were all right. I guess during the call, I was able to pull like 220, and
Yep.
I think on the day itself, I managed to lock out 260, but there
Mm.
was a bit of downward motion. But I somehow managed to lift it up to lock out, and to me, I think this is a testament of that your prep doesn't really need to be good for you to be able to show up. You just need to be able to lift what's there on the day.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
and sadly, 260 was a bit too much, I guess. But at the same time, I was happy that I locked it up. It just told me that I potentially, if like, even with a really bad prep, I could still sort of ramp up my training in just less than 2 weeks. I
Yeah,
think the really sad
insane.
part was that I didn't hit my goals, and the worst part was like I'm still injured till today. Uh, I have worked with like the EPs at Perth. Um, it's
Hmm.
been going decently well. It's also pretty, I guess, mentally challenging because back when I was injured, back when I injured my knee, it was just 6 months, right? And now I'm coming in close to like a year. So I feel like this is something that at the same time it can be the same, but at the same time it's also different because I've never been this injured for that long. So I think when I was reaching around the 6 month mark, which was about 4 months ago, I told myself, okay, I've been injured for this long, it should go, but it didn't. So
Yeah.
that was when it started really to like eat me up inside, and like
Yeah.
I did have thoughts of leaving the sport. And
Yeah, for
I
sure.
guess we can talk about how we both managed to navigate moments where we wanted to quit, but we ended up not quitting. So um, I think I can start since like I was just talking about my injury. So
Hmm.
I think having a really a really good support system. So for me, it was like my coach, Kelly. the EPs at the time as well. Chris, Tom, Josh, John, Alex. They were so helpful as to allow me to call with them, and the six of us just discussing what's going on, implementing it to my program, and it has been helping, and it's something that I'm really thankful for. And also, Steve was also mentoring me through this time because I did reach out to him and saying like I needed I felt like I was in a very dark place and I needed help from it. So
Yeah.
we talked things out, and he was very he was very receptive to it. And also like the people at the gym, like my partner, the people I train with, having them there just to I guess it's really nice that they check up on you, but at the same time, like you wish you can give them a better answer. Like the
Yeah.
past 10
Yeah.
months they've
Yeah.
been asking like how has it been? And like all I can say is like it's the same fuck all.
Yeah, I hate that. I hate that feeling.
Yeah.
I think I've
Yeah.
had the same thing. It's like, oh, how's your shoulder? It's like 8 months later. Oh, it's like 80%. It's like 80% there. You know, like if I do something silly right now, it's still going to feel shit, right? So
Yeah.
like, you know, I think you made a really good point a while ago where you said, um, what was it? Like, sorry, I just had a brain fart.
It's fine.
We were talking about, oh no,
Was it
sorry,
me
sorry.
talking about like the duration of my injuries?
Yes, yes, yes. So you had an expectation about how long it was
Yes.
meant to be, and the
Yes.
fact that it prolongs over that period and it starts to make you feel bad, right? So like having, not that it's unrealistic, like you could have a projection into the future, and once you're set on that and it doesn't meet your expectations, um, I guess you start to feel that mental anguish of like, I should have, I could have, I would have,
Yeah,
right?
because I think it's from the anecdotal experience of 6 months. So, from a similar nature of injury. So, I'm dealing with hamstring tendinopathy now. I was dealing with patella tendinopathy back then. So, I guess with the same nature of injuries and the fact that I've gone through this before, it created that expectation in my head that, okay, I should be fine after 6 months, but it just wasn't.
Yeah,
And I think that also played into why I had thoughts about leaving the sport.
yeah.
Yeah.
We could explore that because I think this topic is like you're in the thick of it basically. So like you're someone who I have no doubt that you're gonna eventually get out of it, right? So you could talk about like what's keeping you, what's helping you to keep going at the moment.
All right. So, earlier I mentioned that I basically flopped uh, my meet last year. So it was Asians. Didn't get the world record, didn't get the best lifter. And I felt like if I had those goals, if I had achieved those goals, I feel like I would be more all right with quitting just because I can tell myself I ended on a good meet. But
Mm,
I feel like I'm a really big sore loser in nature. So I just don't really want to end on a bad. I don't want to leave the sport ending it on a bad note.
yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Just a side comment. We played games last week with a couple of friends, and I lost so bad. And when you
Yeah.
say sore loser, I was like, I resonate with that 100%. Doesn't link to the podcast whatsoever, but just I
It's
just
fine.
thought sore loser, and I was like, I hate that.
Yeah, I think
But
that's
yeah, yeah,
also what keeps us in the sport. Like, I feel like there are not a lot of meets where lifters achieve 100% of their goals. It usually leaves them wanting more. And
yeah,
I think that desire of wanting that more, it just keeps them in the sport.
yeah. I think to
Yeah.
add to that, it's like you've invested 6 years, same as me, like so much time into this sport. If you end it in the way that you do, where it's like, I've got knee pain, I'm done. It's like, what a in my head, it's like what a shameful way to end it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah. Yeah.
you've put so much time and effort, and you don't get to fully realize your potential. And you've also learned that like, yes, it will take a long time, but it's not catastrophic where you would never lift a barbell again, right?
Yeah.
It's just like if we link it all the way back to I guess, diminishing returns and how long things take once you get to elite level. Like things take time, but you know, like if it was hard, not everyone would be able to achieve it, which is the reality, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we can talk about how we coach our lifters who deal with, I guess, longevity issues as well, because we are not just athletes, right? We coach as well, and I guess knowing what we go through, it's something that we can sort of empathize with our roster should they feel that way as well. So
Yeah.
I think I can talk about how, for me, I did coach this one lifter who just there were two lifters I coached, and I think both of them ended up quitting. It wasn't a really easy decision to come to that, but at the same time, we can talk about what leads to that decision as well. So for one of the lifters, it was just that um, they were dealing with an injury, and I think it was to the point where they didn't want to stick to it anymore.
Mm.
And although we've been nursing it very well, I guess the thought of him having to work back to where he was, it was just very daunting for him. So
Yeah.
I told him that uh, this is a sport that takes time, and if time isn't really what he wants to offer and or what he has, because I know he has a very busy life. It's not just like
Yeah.
powerlifting to him. Then of
Yeah.
course I'm going to respect his decision. And yeah, so he left. We still keep in touch to this day. He's still doing very well. It's just that powerlifting doesn't mean to him as much as it once was.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
understandable. I think you bring up a good point. Like there are other things in life aside from powerlifting
Yeah.
that, you know, if you feel like you cannot, not you cannot, but the proposition of you putting effort into something that's not giving you rewards, it just, that's insane, right? So you're better off putting effort in somewhere else that's going to lead to a more fulfilling life. And if you come to that decision fully weighing all the pros and cons, then for some people that might be realistic. Like you might not aim to be the most competitive lifter, right?
Yeah.
But if you, I think it's important to know what powerlifting means to you in terms of priorities,
Yeah.
right? If
And it
if
changes
it's
throughout your life. It's not just gonna be number one
exactly,
all the time. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I guess relating it to like the fact that most people drop out within that first, second, third year of powerlifting, and with the rise of it being a lot of younger lifters, I imagine there's a lot of things changing during that period of time.
Yeah, for
Like
sure.
high school going into uni, uni going into career. These are all big life shifts, right?
Yeah.
And you know, there's you have to put effort into those things as well if you want to succeed in that domain. Not everyone's going to be a professional powerlifter,
Yeah,
right?
and
So
it doesn't really feed you as well because life isn't just about powerlifting.
yeah,
You gotta pay your bills, man.
yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
I think when people are weighing those options out, it could potentially be difficult because that decision might come personally. So as a coach, you might not have had the opportunity to talk to someone before they've even decided that, hey, I'm going to quit the sport, or hey, it's just not a priority for me anymore. Sometimes people go through that decision themselves. But I
Yeah.
think when we do get presented the opportunity to go through that, and there's still a willingness to, I guess, overcome those barriers that feel like they take a long time, I think it's just, how would I say it in the most sensitive way? It's gonna suck, and you need to be patient, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it might mean redefining your goals for a short period of time. I know I used to think like really long term, and when something would happen, like my whole worldview would just shatter. But now I've gotten better where it's like, all right, I will be able to hyper focus in like the specific microcycle that I have and progress what I can, right? So I'm no longer thinking about like what's going to happen 5 years, 10 years, or whatever. It's just like, what steps
Living in
can
the
I take
present.
today?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's been
And
a big shift.
yeah, so for me, coaching the second lifter, it was pretty good because he did ended up he didn't really end up quitting. He just ended up taking a break. And
Mm.
this is when we talk about how priorities shift. Because
Yeah.
I know that guy loves powerlifting, and after a certain period of time, just because of not just because it is an actual issue, like because of injuries, and at the time he was going through school, he just didn't want to pursue powerlifting as intensely as he did before. And I told him my doors were always open, and he said he would come back. So I think it was about half a year, and then
Mm.
he messaged me again. Then he said he was ready to start off, and
That's good.
yeah, and it was just it's just very comforting to know that it's these types of people that you know that they love powerlifting for what it is and not just what they receive. It's not about the PRs for them. It's what they have. They definitely have personal attachment to that sport that none of us can know unless they tell us. It's something that's definitely more than just surface level reasons to why they want to do the sport. So that's the people that you really enjoy coaching because they know why they want to do the sport. They know what they want out of the sport.
Mm.
Yeah,
That's a good point. I think you spoke about like priority shifting and things like that. Um, I think I've noticed that in myself as well. Like not that um, I no longer prioritize powerlifting, but I came from a place where like I'd obsess over it and like I want this. Whereas now I realize like powerlifting to me just like offers an outlet, and then you make sure you cover all your bases, and that's it. You don't need to give, I guess, like you don't need to obsess over it to do well at it at some
yeah,
point. Like it fits a certain box and it satisfies certain needs, but it's not my whole life. It doesn't make up everything.
yeah,
Right. Where it used to be my whole identity. And if something bad happens in training, like I'd be too scared to quit because it's my whole identity. Right. But
yeah, for
it's
sure.
an insecure position to be in, because that also creates like a negative feedback loop. Um, and even though we're talking about longevity, I'm ironically it's kept me in it, but in an unhealthy way. And you're talking about like longevity in a positive and fulfilling way.
Yeah, it's not something driven out of obsession. It's something driven out of love,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's very they do both overlap, but I guess the root of love and obsession comes from different aspects.
yeah, for sure. I think like like you said with the example that you provided, like this guy might have reasons that's kept him in the sport, but if he enjoys doing it and it's not out of a place where like he's no longer doing certain things and running himself into a wall and creating a bad relationship with powerlifting, um, you know, powerlifting becomes a positive aspect.
Yeah,
Whereas I guess for some people, such as yourself and myself, like hyper competitive, where it's like you need powerlifting to succeed because it's like you've you've made it that thing. It could easily get a little negative at times or have like ups and downs. That's just the way powerlifting is, and we all go through a journey, right?
yeah,
Yeah. I think we could end it in a way where we could talk about, I guess, certain factors that could help improve longevity in the sport. I
yeah,
think that'd be very helpful for the viewers.
yeah. Sure. So I think earlier I mentioned having a good support system. So like the
Mm.
people you work with, your coaches, mentors, physios, the people you train with, uh, partners, gym friends, stuff like that. And I think it's very important when things don't go your way. It's fine to just take a step out of the sport. So um,
Yeah.
I guess your your mind and body need to be in sync. So for me, it was when my body can't really function the way I wanted to, and my mind was still at 100%. So I think that really created that expectation of me wanting to do more. But I've learned that I don't need to give it my all when I physically can't. So I
Yeah.
think that's one aspect
Or
as well. I think it's good to
yeah.
take some, I guess, if I were to like say it, like I can divert some of my mind out of powerlifting and focus onto
Yeah.
like things that I want to do more. What
Hmm.
about you, Danny?
I will expand on that point because I was going to say something similar. So
Right.
I think a video that resonated with me a long time ago that got put out was JP Cauchy. Um, do you remember that guy, JP Cauchy?
Yeah.
He's OG. Yeah, OG. So he put out a video saying like things junior powerlifters should focus on or something like that they need to do. And one point that came up was like they need a hobby outside of powerlifting. And
Yeah.
before I was like not receptive to that. I was like, powerlifting, I'm all in. It's my identity, right? But like when you go through something like that where it's like if you can't obsess over it, it creates mental anguish. Having a hobby can give you that ability to take a step out of powerlifting.
Yeah.
For me, that's been incredibly helpful. Like having those things that I feel like are novel again, but don't detract from my training, have been super super helpful. Because like I guess when we talk about novelty, right? Like some people, I guess like time constraints wise as well. Like if you need novelty in the gym, switching up the program for the sake of novelty doesn't necessarily lead to progressive overload.
Yeah.
And I think like as we get later into it, like it kind of necessitates needing to have the same thing in there for, I guess, progressive overload to happen. So I find novelty outside of powerlifting, true novelty. I'm playing golf. I'm like having fun with friends, different things that like when I come back to powerlifting, I know that all I need to do is to like give my best effort and that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. So
Yeah.
it puts powerlifting into perspective, essentially. And so like when an injury happens or, I face a setback, it doesn't feel as um, threatening to my identity because I have these other things that I could lean on. And like you said, like having a support system as well is huge. Like I think I would have also quit had I not had a coach. So Steve has been hugely helpful, as well as Kedrick with my nutrition for keeping me in the sport because I don't want to let them down, right? And so when going through a challenging session or going through something, um, going through injury, I know Steve's been through worse, right? So it's like if that provides me reassurance, just knowing like he understands, he's been through it as well. So um, yeah, finding a hobby, like you said, to be able to step out of powerlifting when you need to doesn't mean you always need to step out. Like, but when you do go through periods where it's like you cannot just go all in on powerlifting for the moment, having a secondary hobby could be helpful, as well as having a good support system. I agree 100% with as well.
Yeah. So I think we covered most of all of the bases, and I think it's a good way to end it off.
Yeah, for sure. That was a good chat,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, man. Likewise to you. So thank you guys. Thank you, Danny, for hopping on, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.
No problem. Thanks, guys.